Every winter, your body reminds you why hair exists. It keeps you warm. That's why mammals grow thick coats in cold weather. It's why our ancestors evolved hair in the first place. And it's why the top of your head loses heat faster than almost anywhere else on your body. So here's the mystery. If hair is so useful, why do millions of people gradually lose it from the one place that needs it most? That isn't just inconvenient. From an evolutionary perspective, it doesn't seem to make any sense. After all, evolution is supposed to remove traits that make survival harder. Yet male pattern baldness affects millions of men around the world, and it has existed for thousands of years. So why didn't evolution get rid of it? To answer that, we first have to clear up one common misconception. Humans didn't suddenly become bald. In fact, compared to almost every other primate, humans are already bald. You have roughly the same number of hair follicles as a chimpanzee. The difference is that most of your body hair became shorter, finer, and far less noticeable over millions of years. It didn't disappear completely. Your scalp, however, remained different. It kept growing long, thick hair. And scientists think that's because, unlike the rest of your body, your head never stopped needing protection. Your brain generates an enormous amount of heat. At the same time, it's constantly exposed to direct sunlight. Hair acts like a natural shield, reducing the amount of solar radiation reaching your scalp while still allowing air to circulate. It's one of the few places where keeping hair actually made evolutionary sense. Which makes baldness even stranger. If scalp hair is so useful, why would evolution allow people to lose it? Evolution doesn't care what happens after you've already passed on your genes. It only cares whether you survive long enough to reproduce. That's one of the biggest misunderstandings people have about evolution. They assume every part of the human body has been perfectly optimized. It hasn't. Natural selection becomes much weaker once you've already had children. A trait that appears later in life often escapes evolutionary pressure because, by then, it's already done little or no damage to reproduction. Male pattern baldness usually begins in adulthood, often years after puberty, sometimes after a man has already become a father. From evolution's point of view, that's late. And if a trait doesn't significantly reduce the chances of having children, there's very little pressure to remove it from the population. But that still leaves another mystery. Why do some men lose their hair while others keep it for life? That's where genetics enters the story. For years, people thought there had to be a single baldness gene. There isn't. Male pattern baldness is influenced by dozens of different genes, although one of the most important sites on the X chromosome, which men inherit from their mothers. That's why you've probably heard people say, "Look at your grandfather on your mother's side." There's some truth to that, but it isn't the whole story. Your father's genes matter too, along with many others researchers are still discovering. In other words, whether you go bald isn't decided by one bad roll of the dice. It's the result of a complicated genetic combination that no one can predict perfectly. But genes alone don't make your hair fall out. They simply determine how your hair responds to a hormone your body has been producing since puberty. That hormone is testosterone. Well, not exactly. The real culprit is something called DHT, or dihydrotestosterone. Your body converts a small amount of testosterone into DHT every single day. For most men, that isn't a problem. But if your hair follicles happen to be genetically sensitive to DHT, something unusual begins to happen. The follicles slowly shrink, not overnight, over years. Each new hair grows back slightly thinner than the last, then even thinner. Eventually, some follicles become so small that they stop producing visible hair altogether. The strange part is that DHT isn't an enemy. It's actually an important hormone. It helps develop male characteristics during puberty and plays a role throughout adult life. Without it, the human body wouldn't develop normally. So evolution couldn't simply remove DHT without creating far bigger problems. Instead, some people's hair follicles became the ones paying the price. But here's where the story becomes even stranger. If baldness offered no advantage, why is it so common? Some scientists think it never needed an advantage. It simply wasn't harmful enough for evolution to remove. Others believe baldness may have accidentally traveled alongside other useful genetic traits. When natural selection favors one beneficial gene, nearby genes can sometimes come along for the ride, even if they don't provide any benefit themselves. It's a bit like buying a phone because of its amazing camera and ending up with apps you never wanted. Evolution works in surprisingly similar ways. Then there's another idea. Could baldness itself have been useful? Some researchers have suggested that a bald scalp may have acted as an honest signal of age. In ancient human societies, age often meant experience. A younger man might be stronger, but an older man had survived droughts, predators, disease, and conflict, His knowledge could mean the difference between life and death for the rest of the group. A receding hairline may have made that experience immediately visible. The evidence for this idea is limited, and many scientists remain unconvinced, but it highlights something important. Not every trait exists because it makes us physically stronger. Sometimes a trait survives simply because it doesn't interfere with survival enough to disappear. Which brings us back to the original question. If hair keeps us warm, why do humans go bald? The answer isn't that evolution made a mistake, it's that evolution was solving a different problem. Natural selection strongly protected the hair on our heads because it helped shield one of the most important organs in the human body. But once people had children and passed on their genes, the pressure to keep every single hair became much weaker. Millions of years later, that ancient compromise is still written into our DNA. Today, people spend billions of dollars every year trying to reverse baldness. Hair transplants, medications, shampoos, laser treatments. Entire industries exist because of something evolution never considered important enough to fix. The strange part is, your ancestors probably didn't spend much time worrying about a receding hairline. Surviving the next winter mattered far more than looking younger. But today, in a world where appearance influences confidence, careers, and relationships, a trait that barely mattered for most of human history has become one of the most talked about parts of modern life. The next time you notice someone losing their hair, remember that you're not looking at an evolutionary failure. You're looking at a reminder that evolution never promised perfection. It only promised one thing, that you survive long enough to pass your genes to the next generation. Everything after that was mostly your own problem.